I'm not sure any intelligence agency on Earth, be it the Americans, British, Israelis, or the Russians, would sanction such an operation that would lead to the mass trafficking of women and children for sex.
The stupidly rich men who are also evil and sleazy don't need an intelligence service to enable their evil sleaziness.
Secrets and Spies presents Espresso Martini with Chris Carr and Matt Fulton.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Espresso Martini. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing good, Chris. How are you? It's good to be back with you.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I'm not too bad, thank you. I'm dodging the rain today, so it's quite nice to be indoors because the heat wave that has been consuming London, the muggy heat wave, has sort of slightly subsided and turned into rain, and we had a bit of thunder the other day as well. One flash of thunder, so it was a very conservative thunderstorm that.
Back to normal business for you guys there with the weather.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad, to be honest. I've got to this point where I don't know what it is. I mean, summers where I grew up were different to summers in London. So London seems to contain heat and it's very humid. Whilst like in the leafy green Surrey where I grew up, it was a different story and summers felt bearable.
Yeah.
But now I just feel they've become an endurance test. It's like, I'm trying to be negative about the lovely weather because I have been enjoying the long evenings, but my God, I've had enough of the repressive heat everywhere. I'm just like, I'm done with it. Bring on the autumn, get those pumpkin spice lattes in. Yeah.
It'll be here soon. It'll be here soon.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm actually looking up how to make my own this year. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe do a special on that.
Yeah.
But there we go. Yeah, we've got a very interesting episode coming up today. First, we'll be looking a little bit into the Epstein saga and whether or not he may or may not have had some connections to intelligence services. We don't know which one, but we'll talk a little bit about that. There's been an interesting spy case in the UK where a man has just been convicted for helping Russia or allegedly helping Russia because he claims that he was actually trying to expose Russia, but that's a whole other story. Then we'll be looking at a little bit about the struggle for the control of the Arctic, and then we will be finishing up looking at Trump has now agreed for Europe to supply weapons to Ukraine. So, so I think quite a jam-packed episode coming up. So, Matt, the first story is one that you picked out about Epstein, which obviously is a massive story in the US. I'd say it's
biggest political story in the country right now and has been for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking widely here. In the UK, it's not like constant updates about it. I think obviously people are talking about it, and obviously we're concerned from a geopolitical point of view of like, well, I mean, are we concerned? I don't know. There are people speculating about whether this is the end of Trump or not, etc. So I'll hand over to you, and you can tell us a little bit about what's going on.
We'll talk about all that stuff. So, this saga over the Jeffrey Epstein files and who or what they contain might be the most damaging rift inside the MAGA movement since Trump first ascended that escalator in 2015. The scandal has been simmering for years, but now it's boiling over. The latest Wall Street Journal article that came out yesterday as we're recording, reveals that back in May, Attorney General Pam Bondi quietly informed Trump that his name appears multiple times in the Epstein documents, though the specifics of those mentions remain unclear as of our recording. Trump was reportedly told the references were mostly unverified hearsay and that hundreds of other names appear as well. Still, the inclusion of his name paired with the administration's sudden decision to halt any further release of Epstein materials has detonated inside his political base. So here's the context. For years, Trump World and the broader pro-Trump media ecosystem insisted that Epstein's files would expose a sprawling network of elites, Hollywood liberals, Democratic politicians, globalist power brokers, that Trump, they said, was the one man brave enough to expose them. Once he returned to power, the truth would come out. Now that promise has collapsed. The Justice Department says there's no smoking gun client list, no blackmail network, and no evidence that Epstein was murdered. The backlash has been ferocious. Elon Musk, Alex Jones, and some MAGA influencers have turned on Trump, accusing him of betrayal or suggesting he's been compromised. Even House Speaker Mike Johnson, one of Trump's most reliable allies, has called for more disclosures, and a lot of other senior House Republicans have as well. As the New Yorker's John Alsop notes in an article linked in the show notes, this isn't just about Epstein anymore. It's about the conspiratorial identity of the MAGA movement itself. One that sees Trump not merely as a politician, but as a kind of messianic figure fighting a shadowy elite. If he's not willing to expose them, or worse, if he's shielding them, then what's left of the myth? This is no longer a clash between MAGA and the establishment. It's an internal reckoning between those who want to preserve the fantasy and those realizing they may have been sold one. And yet, beneath all the noise, there's still the question that sits squarely in our wheelhouse here on Secrets and Spies. Was Epstein ever tied to an intelligence service? And Frank Snepp, a former CIA officer, offers one of the few sober examinations of that possibility. As he writes, the question isn't whether Epstein was some kind of Hollywood-style super spy, it's whether he, or more plausibly, Ghislaine Maxwell, might have been a source, a facilitator, or even an unwitting asset. Her father, Robert Maxwell, was almost certainly connected to Israeli intelligence in some capacity, and agencies like Mossad do sometimes rely on honey traps, compromat, and high society intermediaries to gather influence. That doesn't mean Epstein was Mossad, but it does mean his access and protection would have drawn interest. So where does that leave us? Trump's name is in the files. The promised disclosures aren't coming, and the movement that spent years promising to expose the Epstein conspiracy is now eating itself alive. Meanwhile, an angle that's actually worth deeper, more serious investigation, the potential intelligence dimensions of Epstein's operation, is being drowned out by chaos and grievance. But if there's anything salvageable in this sordid saga, it might just be that question, especially now as the MAGA myth begins to crack under its own weight. So, Chris, what do you think about all this?
Well, yeah, so many angles to come at with this one. I think I'll just start off saying this feels like a very Trumpian scandal now, and I think Trump was playing with fire.
Yep.
Especially as he appears in the documents now. We don't know in what capacity, because there's plenty of photographs and video I've seen of Trump and Epstein together. Apparently, according to the it was the Wall Street Journal reported that Trump had gifted Epstein a book and put a personal message in there.
Trump's suing for that.
So I think they were kind of pals for a period in the sort of late 80s, early 90s.
They were, and apparently, by all evidence available to us, they were like very close friends for like 10, 15 years. They had a falling out, I believe in like 2004 over a house, some sort of real estate deal in Palm Beach, but they were buddies. They were close.
Yeah. For a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows what we will find out down the line. But with regards to the whole, should we say, Epstein MAGA conspiracy theory, so I don't think, I don't think Trump necessarily believed the MAGA view on the whole thing about this. It's like implicating Hillary Clinton and the elites, etc., in some terrible thing. I think Trump's more of an opportunist. And he used the demand for the Epstein files to be released as a way to kind of get him back in the White House. And as you were saying, now he's back in power, and he's possibly implicated in the files that he now instinctively wants to move on and brush it under the carpet and call it the Epstein hoax, is what I've heard him call it recently, a bit like the Russia hoax. And the Epstein hoax, as he calls it, he's making out that reports of his alleged name in the files go back to some sort of Obama-era conspiracy against him. And it kind of reminds me of Trump and COVID, where COVID somehow became, any mention of COVID became some sort of criticism of Trump and an affront to Trump and Trumpism, when in fact it was a very serious, virus. Mm-hmm. Virus or disease? What do we call it? Virus?
It's a virus.
Yeah. Virus, yeah. And I don't think Trump's going to be able to brush this under the carpet, and I doubt he will ever hear the end of this until he delivers on his earlier campaign promise, because the thing with conspiracy theorists, once they've kind of locked onto something, They're never really satisfied of any answer, but this won't stop. This will go on for years. Even if the documents do get released, there will be speculation about whether the documents are even authentic or whether they've been redacted in some way. And I've got a little bit I could go into in a minute, about the way the documents have been treated at the FBI, because Alison Gill did quite an interesting piece. So Alison Gill from Mueller, she wrote, has actually filed a Freedom of Information request for the Epstein files, and she's got a little bit of info on it, and she's been trying to get people who've worked for the FBI, who've now obviously probably been fired or whatever, to give some background on what they've seen. So I've got a little bit on that in a minute. But I'll hand back to you for a moment, Matt. So what are your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just sort of say up front, where I am on these kind of questions. I'm agnostic on whether Epstein killed himself. I genuinely don't know.
Me too. Yeah.
But I do find the entire thing deeply suspicious and weird. And I don't fault anyone for holding the firm belief that he didn't. That he, didn't kill himself. I have close friends, very intelligent, rational people, not conspiracy theorists at all, who are convinced he was murdered, and I'm not going to tell them that they're wrong. The official story has enough gaps, enough institutional failure, enough kind of convenient timing to keep that question alive forever. So, I think if someone does think that, I don't think that's an entirely crazy thing to believe at all in any way. On the separate question of whether Epstein was tied to an intelligence agency, I tend to lean in a firmer no there. But again, I mean, I don't know. Coercion, of course, is on that mice, spectrum of why someone spies. So money, ideology, coercion, ego. Yeah, coercion is there. And as Frank Snepp notes in his sort of Substack there that we have linked, compromat, blackmail, it's a tactic for sure. But like the tactics you're using to get that compromat, to me, is just like so far beyond even like, it's just so I struggle to even go there, But what I do know is that this theory often travels with a lot of ugly baggage. There's an unmistakable anti-Semitic undertone in how it's phrased and in how it's framed by some corners of the internet, where these are people for whom everything eventually boils down to blaming the Jews, and we have to be really cautious not to fall into that trap. Find some decent reporting and commentary on this specific pocket of the scandal that I felt comfortable sharing on this podcast was difficult. I'll say that much.
Yeah, it was. I think Frank's piece is the best I've seen on that topic so far.
Yeah.
It is, because Robert Maxwell, who's Ghislaine's father, has this sort of connection to Mossad and might well have been an agent of influence.
Yeah.
And I think it's a pretty definitive yes that he was, but to what extent, obviously we need to do some more homework on. But as you're saying, like with the anti-Semitism and stuff, it's sort of this tale, because this tale is connected to MAGA conspiracy theories and conspiracy theories in general. Sadly, a lot of conspiracy theories usually end up leading to anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And it's something we have to kind of walk across very carefully, really. Sorry, I'll let you continue on.
No. I mean, as far as like, Robert Maxwell and looking at this question a bit deeper and everything, and his daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, and what she might have been involved with, I'm open to taking a closer look at that on the show in an episode in, the fall. If folks listening want to hear that, let us know. Like I said, totally down to do it if I find the right person to talk to about it. My gut would probably be to focus on Robert Maxwell, like, historically what we know, and then kind of lean into the questions about his daughter and everything from there. But I think it's a really tricky thing to talk about, because I think so much of I know so much of the information environment around this is just so polluted with just bullshit that it's hard to sift through and not get it all over your hands yourself.
Well, this is the irony of conspiracy theories. I think they end up providing cover for bad behavior, and then the real thing. So for me, with the Epstein saga, we'll call it that, the real tragedy and the real horrendousness is the victims and what happened to them. These women who are trafficked, underage, people, women, children who were trafficked. And, I don't think any of them have ever really had their proper day in court. You've got Prince Andrew, who was accused of being connected to this, who's kind of evaded any real responsibility for his role in it. And all these conspiracy theories just muddy the water further and further. I mean, I have actually personally kind of, semi-divorced myself from this Epstein stuff because it was just so full of bullshit.
Yeah.
That I was just like, and I've had a few people come up to me privately over the last year and a bit who, when they hear about the podcast or whatever, they come up to me and go, well, what about Epstein? And I'm like, Jesus Christ, and it is sort of like become a byword for the deep state and all these sort of other nonsense conspiracy theories. So here's my thoughts on Epstein, the spy, as I've put it. So if Epstein was gathering compromised information on people, obviously this would be a very effective way to do it. But I'm not sure any intelligence agency on Earth, be it the Americans, British, Israelis, or the Russians, would sanction such an operation that would lead to the mass trafficking of women and children for sex. I find it hard to believe, through what I've read over the years and people we've spoken to, that anyone would actually sanction such an operation, especially on a mass scale like the Epstein. Yes, some services like Russia and China and some allied services to us have been documented as using honey traps, but those again are not on the mass scale that we're talking about, what Epstein's was up to. I think it's a matter of fact what Epstein's done, but it's just the speculations around about who's involved. Now, I think instead, if Epstein were recruited as a spy, which again, I'm not sure he was, he would probably have had to take a more passive role in documenting people's compromising information rather than instigating it. Because again, if Epstein were this sort of super spy who was trafficking women, he's instigating and entrapping a lot of people, and that wouldn't really fly. And in a way, it's funny, I kind of weirdly thought of Guy Burgess a little bit, because Guy Burgess, who was one of the Cambridge Five, used to keep tabs on all the people he socialized with, and he was always looking for and making notes of compromising information. But I'm not aware that he actually went out of his way to compromise people, if that makes sense. He was just holding on to that information, would pass it to his Russian handlers, and obviously that information would be used, but I don't think he instigated the compromising information. So there is a possibility that Epstein could have been a source due to the access to people he had, but again, any agency worth its salt and looking at the legal and moral implications of what Epstein was up to, they probably most likely would have decided it was not worth the blowback from any association with him, which is probably kind of what Trump's feeling at the moment.
That's true.
And I'm glad I'm not a bottle of ketchup in the White House right now. Because I hear they have a short life expectancy during situations of high stress.
Yes, the walls. It's a really hard time for all the walls in the White House when this happens. Yeah.
And Frank Snep rightly asked his article, did any intelligence service know what Epstein was up to and keep tabs on it? So there is a possibility intelligence officers could have interviewed or recruited people on the periphery of Epstein's trafficking and exploitation operation, and those services could have reported back on who was involved. If so, there are legal implications to that, and if the US or UK intelligence services were, involved in keeping tabs, then they might well be sitting on a lot of interesting data that has, some serious legal implications. And for the UK, with Prince Andrew allegedly being involved with Epstein, MI6 must have done some digging because, and his royal protection officers as well must have logs on his proximity to things, because during the 80s and 90s, members of the royal family were targets of the IRA. So MI6, MI5 and the Metropolitan Police would have been responsible for his and any other member of the royal family's safety, and they would definitely be keeping an eye on him and his associates for security purposes. So there may be a question there about to what level MI5, MI6 and the Metropolitan Police knew what Epstein was up to. I have no idea what they do or don't know. Then the other question, which I haven't seen floated around, maybe I've missed it, what about private and wealthy individuals or organized crime? Could they have recruited Epstein? Could they have been facilitating him? Because Epstein his financial status, there's a bit of a murkiness around about how he made his money. Was he some sort of asset for organized crime? So, organized crime love murdering people in prison, etc.
Yeah.
They would be perfectly placed, the mafia or whatever, be perfectly placed to bump him off in prison if that were the case. I think that might be more likely than the intelligence services doing it, because, again, the intelligence services are kind of caught up in a lot of legal red tape that makes assassinating people, especially assassinating American citizens on American soil, rather legally dubious and unlikely. And as far as I know, British and American intelligence services don't really go around bumping people off, except for in war zones. They tend to use a drone or special forces to deal with people. So I don't know. I think organized crime is more likely if Epstein did die by some, by killing himself. But it's an interesting one.
Yeah. You know that scene in Godfather Part 2 when Tom Hagen, Robert Duvall's character, forget the other character's name, but there's one guy who was tied up in the whole Corleone kind of family, their dealings and stuff, and he gets pinched, he gets arrested by the feds, and he's in prison, he's in some sort of holding facility somewhere, and Tom Hagen sort of goes in and sits down with him and just sort of says, some version of I haven't seen this movie in a while. I should maybe watch it tonight. But some version of back in the Roman times when someone tried to come at the emperor and they failed. They handled themselves. They didn't kind of wait and signal for this character to then later go in and kill himself. Again, I don't know what the hell happened here. The one reality that I keep coming back to whenever I ask myself this question, I think stupidly rich men who are also evil and sleazy don't need an intelligence service to enable their evil sleaziness.
No.
You don't need the involvement of an intelligence agency to explain this at all. And beyond that, using blackmail as a recruitment tool, it happens. Yes, again, I agree with you that doing it on this kind of way, on this scale, is just really hard for me to sort of believe, but it's also bad tradecraft. Intelligence services generally want agents who choose to spy for them because of ideology, revenge, money, ego, something internal. If you've got someone who's only cooperating because you're holding compromat over them, that is a ticking time bomb for you as an intelligence service and whatever officer is handling this agent. It makes them unreliable and more likely to burn you down the line. And that's,
Yeah, exactly. If you compromise someone, they're going to try and find every way to fuck you over, basically.
And to get out of it.
Yeah, totally. So bear that in mind for a story later, actually, because that might be worth coming up back to in a bit. Now, the files themselves, according to a post by Alison Gill of Muller, she wrote, so she filed a Freedom of Information request for the files, and it asked for anybody online who worked for the FBI who were familiar with the files to get in contact with her. And apparently, so personnel were instructed to record the names of individuals in the files, and Trump's name is included in this process, but his name was not logged until much later in this process, apparently, where his name is included in the files, and there's a log with references. And apparently, there are about 1,000 people who worked in the Information Management Division of the FBI New York field office who were assigned to review the Epstein files. So 1,000 people have looked over them for the FBI. And there are apparently 100,000 files containing roughly 300,000 pages. And apparently the process of reviewing the Epstein and Maxwell file was chaotic, and orders were constantly changing, sometimes daily. One person Gill spoke to on the condition of anonymity said that many agents spent more time waiting for new instructions than they did processing files. But here's what caught her attention. The files were stored on a shared drive accessible to anybody in the division. Normally, access is restricted to those directly involved in a project, but due to the hurried nature of the operation, the usual permission safeguards were not applied. And additionally, the internal SharePoint site the Bureau eventually used to distribute the files lacked its standard access restrictions, and as a result, the Epstein and Maxwell files were viewable by a much larger group of people than previously assumed. Gill also pointed out that something else that stood out for her is the potential stress and trauma caused by the review of the files. They included photos of yacht parties and photo shoots, and that some analysts weren't prepared for this, and the photos accompanied victim testimony. And in one instance, Epstein had instructed a group of young girls, many safely assumed to be minors, to remove their clothes and pose nude on the beach. It was the casual coercion of it that hit me, this analyst has said to her. Now, after the review was complete, the DOJ and the FBI decided not to release anything, and that surprised the analysts who had worked on this. They for sure thought that a scrubbed version with the names of the victims redacted would at least be released. And then from the 14th of March until its completion, the analysts assigned to review the files at the IMD were told not to leave the building. And they worked long shifts under chaotic and ever-changing conditions with exposure to disturbing material. And they did end up letting some analysts go home for short periods of time, but then they'd be right back in the office reviewing the files. And apparently morale was abysmal, which you can imagine being stuck in an office for that long. And then one source also added to say there's nothing or to say it's a hoax is bullshit. So, people have looked at these files, there's some horrendous stuff in there. And, if anybody is wanting to find out what's released, I mean, you got 300,000 pages to look at. So, yeah.
I mean, for all those reasons that you said, anyone who finds this to be a cover-up, a conspiracy, I can't fault them for feeling that way. I don't think that's an insane thing to do. I think there's definitely a cover-up here to some degree. The extent of it and what exactly it means and what they're covering up, I don't know yet. I just don't know.
It's a developing story. We might find out more soon.
Yeah. What's fascinating to me here is how this sort of collapse in the MAGA movement mirrors exactly what Mike Rothschild described to you in your interview with him last weekend about QAnon, about that whole grift. And he said, QAnon functions like a financial scam, but the payoff isn't monetary, it's emotional. It's the promised high of seeing all your imagined enemies punished. And when that moment never comes, when, the storm fails to arrive, believers are left with this sort of massive psychological void. And that's what I think is happening here with some MAGA faithful. They were promised these Epstein files would be, the reckoning that they've fantasized over for years, that Trump would pull back the curtain and expose all. Instead, it turns out his name is all over them, and his long friendship with Epstein is becoming harder to hand wave away.
Yeah. Well, one of the ironic things about Trump is for all the talk about the terrible elites, the greed, the corruption, etc. I mean, for me, Trump's always embodied that. So for them to put all their faith in that man, honestly, what were they expecting? It's what I would say.
Yeah,
it's deeply ironic.
Yep.
So this is a developing story. You never know. We might get some more kind of solid information as to the extent of who was involved in the next few weeks, few months, or we may not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I'm serious about, if folks listening want to hear more about, Robert Maxwell and that sort of stuff and the possible connections that his daughter had also to the intelligence world or whatever in a very kind of responsible, grounded, level-headed way, please let us know. I am totally open and willing to do that in the fall.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think we can be done with that for now.
Yeah. Let's take our first break and be right back with more. So welcome back, everybody. So our next story, well, put on your winter jacket because we're all heading to the Arctic. So a BBC story is talking about the struggling control for the Arctic, and it's accelerating and is riskier than ever. So some key points from that piece. So President Trump has repeatedly expressed interest in controlling Greenland, citing its strategic value for U.S. national security. The U.S. already maintains a crucial radar base at B2Feek, apparently that's how you pronounce it. I double checked earlier. Apparently the P is pronounced as a B, so B2Feek or P2Feek. So I'll let you decide which one's the correct pronunciation. But from what I checked, it's B2Feek. That supports the ballistic missile early warning system. And as Dr. Elizabeth Buchanan puts it, Greenland acts as physical insurance for the American homeland, a forward operating post for missile defense and early warning systems. Russia is alarmed by growing US interest in Greenland and NATO expansion. They're always alarmed about that. And views Western missile defense as a threat to its nuclear deterrent. It has responded by militarizing its own Arctic zones, upgrading air bases in the region, and relying more heavily on its Northern Fleet and the Kola Peninsula submarine force. This build-up, whilst defensive in part, is triggering growing concern in Europe over the risk of escalation in the region. Greenland remains part of Denmark, and US ambitions to acquire it or assert greater control over the territory have sparked anger in Copenhagen and concern among other NATO members. Quiet diplomatic questions are being asked: what happens if America, the alliance's most powerful member, challenges the sovereignty of another member? Other Arctic regions are also potential flashpoints. Norway's Svalbard Islands are governed by a treaty to allow Russian access, making them ripe for dispute. Meanwhile, the GI-UK gap, Greenland, Iceland and the UK, is a historic choke point for Russian submarines entering the Atlantic, hence why Scotland's important. And NATO's renewed focus on surveillance here, including AI-enhanced monitoring systems, underscores the growing importance of this stretch of ocean. Climate change is opening up Arctic waters with predictions of ice-free summers by 2040 or sooner. And when I read that, it really made me think, wow. The accelerating competition over Arctic shipping routes and natural resources as the so-called Polar Silk Road emerges, Russia is determined to secure its dominance and deter others from building up forces nearby. A recent Danish intelligence report warns that Moscow is now more assertive and confrontational, willing to take riskier steps in the Arctic to defend its interests. So, Matt, what are your thoughts on this rather chilly but heating up story?
Yeah, I have not heard Trump, thank God, bring up the question of, acquiring Greenland somehow by force if necessary for
it's kind of cooled off a bit.
several months now. And so it didn't come up at the NATO summit. And very, very glad to hear that. But I don't think it makes it kind of any less damaging, and I think what you just sort of outlined here really shows why those sort of concerns about Arctic security, whether it be around missile defense or anti-submarine warfare and surveillance, economic concerns with Arctic shipping lanes opening up in the future because of climate change and everything. I mean, these are all, we've talked about this on here in the past. These are all very sort of real and legitimate concerns.
Yeah.
Not just American concerns, but, European concerns as well, Canadian concerns. There is, a legitimate reason to say, hey, we should probably, increase our military presence in Greenland to some extent. There's been a U.S. military presence in Greenland since World War II. Bidefik, as you mentioned, Space Force Base remains a critical node in our missile early warning architecture. So, when we talk about expanding that presence, say, under segments of the Golden Dome, so-called, if that ever gets built, it's not a radical ask. That's a serious, workable conversation to have with Denmark and our NATO allies. But you don't start that conversation by, demanding the annexation of Greenland. That is the single dumbest, self-destructive strategy you could possibly devise to go about that request. I mean, it's probably the only way that it's the only strategy you could devise that would probably fail. I mean, it's one of the things that you would just go ask Denmark.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What is it? And to be fair, prior to Trump, there wasn't really a big debate about this because I'm assuming behind the scenes, things were going on as kind of normal because it's not like Denmark have said, right, America, get out.
No.
They haven't said that at all.
Even in nowhere.
Yeah, it's sort of just come out. Yeah, it's so bizarre.
I swear to God, it's what drives me nuts about this kind of thing. It's one of those things that if I said this time last summer, okay, if Trump gets elected, one of the first things he's gonna do in office is to demand to annex Canada and Greenland. I would have been roundly dismissed and criticized as some, anti-Trump deranged nutcase. Like, you're just making stuff up. That's crazy. He would never do that.
You have Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah,
that's what you have.
Yeah. Anyway,
well,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I brought this up. I didn't want to. My goal was not to rag on Trump and Trumpism with this piece.
Yes.
I think.
Thank you
Yeah.
for. Yeah.
I think what we've said before, the problem is Trump's kind of his own worst enemy with these things sometimes, because he, with his ridiculous ambitions to take Greenland by force and make it part of America, has kind of eclipsed the actually more important story, which is the strategic importance of Greenland. And obviously that there are ambitions to upgrade missile defense, early warning systems, as well as upgrades for NORAD in Canada as well. And my theory is, because my working theory of Trump and his annexation of Canada and Greenland stuff came from, I think he got some early briefings very early on about the importance of Canada and NORAD and the importance of Greenland and US missile defense. And I think somewhere along the lines, he's just decided we just need to have it. Why do we allow other people to run these things or something? It's very bizarre.
Yeah. I've always felt that he had some sort of, because it came up somewhere after the election, he got some sort of an Arctic security briefing or missile defense briefing, something like that. And it came out as, we need to take Greenland. But, there's you've cited all the very kind of real and important and, justified security and economic concerns that are unfolding up there. And it's just, it's not something that we should be arguing about or in any way. It's an easiest, increasing our military presence in Greenland is one of the easier things that you could do, unless you do it that way.
Yeah. Well, it's exactly it. And I think with the way things have been going with the war in Ukraine, I think more and more people who are in the proximity to Russia have been turning to NATO and saying, could you help us? I don't think Greenland or Denmark are going to decline any more American presence there unless you do what Trump was doing. And the other thing as well, I mean, is all this bluster just Trump and his making kind of maximalist ploy? Because it seems to be a bit of or allegedly this is a tactic of his where he presents this sort of maximalist position, and then eventually people bow down and give him what he wants, and it not turning out to be quite as bad as we thought it was. But I don't know. It's a weird one. And it just, as always, eclipses the important side of it, which is the Arctic security. And there is one other thing as well. So there's one other, slightly more, I don't know if murky is the right word. Depends about how you go about it, really. But obviously, energy is a big factor here as well. So the other thing about the Arctic is estimated to contain up to 13% of the world's undiscovered oil and 30% of undiscovered natural gas. So as ice retreats, extraction will become more feasible, and controlling or securing access to these resources might become a growing priority for Arctic bordering states. Now, one key thing that is likely of concern to the US and maybe the West is the rising battle over resources. I think, we've said this before, Russia and China have a huge influence over Africa and certain mineral-rich countries in the Middle East, such as Afghanistan. And some of these countries contain, they're rich in minerals that provide components for microchips and batteries. And with our current kind of battle for technological supremacy playing out with AI, etc., and our desire for clean energy and electric vehicles, batteries and microchips are going to play a big part in all of this. So is the Trump administration more concerned about mineral deposits in Greenland, or are they concerned about, Greenland and the Arctic, or are they actually more concerned about Arctic security? That's the question. And the only reason I bring that up is because obviously Trump's recent mineral deal with Ukraine, it does sort of feel like there's a theme running in the Trump administration about minerals at the moment and access to them. So that I bring that up just purely more for speculation at this point, but it's something that probably should be considered.
Yeah. Yes.
And definitely I'd love to do some episodes in the near future about the whole kind of battle for resources and the whole microchip stuff and all that sort of thing. I think there's some very interesting stuff to be discussed in all that, and it's still an area I'm kind of getting my head around a little bit. But yeah. So, is there anything else you'd like to add about the Arctic?
No, fascinating area. Really kind of interesting, and sometimes concerning developments going on up there. Again, I go back to not anything that should be all that controversial or difficult to handle.
No, indeed. Well, let's move to a court case in Britain that's just concluded. So a British man's been found guilty of spying for Russia. So Howard Phillips, a 65-year-old man from Harlow, Essex, has been convicted under the UK National Security Act for attempting to assist what he believed were Russian intelligence agents. The jury returned a unanimous guilty verdict after 4 hours of deliberation. Phillips, described by his ex-wife as being infatuated with MI5 and MI6 and obsessed with spy films, attempted to pass personal information about former Defense Secretary Sir Grant Shapps to undercover officers posing as Russian agents. So in March 2024, whilst Phillips had an active job application with the UK Border Force, and pre-employment checks were being conducted, Phillips exchanged emails with the undercover officers known as Dima and Sasha, believing them to be Russian intelligence officers. Sasha and Dima communicated with Phillips over WhatsApp, but he would not reveal what he had to offer unless they met in person. So he was asked to leave a document explaining what he could offer, which would then lead to a meeting. Phillips agreed and provided a document on a USB stick, placing it in an exposed seat shaft of a bicycle that was located on the corner of Polygon Road in St Pancras and the Euston area of London. So anybody in London who wants to do a spy tour, place to go. The USB stick contained a document offering his services to Russia with 100% loyalty and dedication, claiming he would be invaluable to a foreign power. He then met with the undercover agents, the fake agents, multiple times, including in London and at the Lakeside Shopping Centre. And he also requested they refer to Moscow as mother in their communication. He claimed to the undercover officers that he had applied for a UK Border Force job, allegedly to gain insider access for Russia. So Phillips was finally arrested on the 16th of May 2024, shortly after another meeting near King's Cross. Authorities say that his actions are motivated by financial gain with little regard for the damage to national security. He now awaits sentencing later this year. So Matt, any thoughts on that one?
Didn't his ex-wife say that he always wanted to be James Bond and watched a bunch of movies and TV shows about MI5 and MI6 and stuff?
Yeah, and James Bond did not spy for the Russians.
That's what I'm thinking. Like, if that's your thing, if you want to be James Bond, why are you trying to work for a couple guys you think are named Sasha and Dima? I missed that movie in the series.
Well, there might be a twist we'll come to in a minute, but okay. I'll let you continue on.
No, what's the twist?
Well, okay, so his defense. So this is his defense, and let's just say guilty people always say, I didn't really do it. But he claimed that he was actually providing all this information he was collecting information on the Russians, and he was acting kind of as a dangle. He didn't use that term. I'm using that term. So he claims he was trying to get recruited by the Russians so then he could pass on information to the Israelis. And the reason he claimed the Israelis because of his Jewish heritage. So he claims he met Grant Shapps at a synagogue. So he weaved in a bit of his Jewish identity into what he was doing, and he claims
just because you're Jewish doesn't make it not illegal to spy for the Israelis. That's still a crime.
No, exactly, yeah, and so so was he enacting some weird fantasy where he was becoming like a double agent?
That's what it sounds like.
It does, and because when I looked into his sort of story, because he basically,
dude, just go home. Like, you're going to get yourself hurt. Like, stop.
Yeah. He was 60. Oh yeah, here we go. So he basically said that he wrote to the Russian embassy because events were happening around the world, and he was intending to track and expose Russian agents. When he was quizzed by his lawyer on events, he said, in particular, the war between Israel and Gaza and Ukraine war. Were his motivations to wanting to track Russian agents.
Go volunteer. Go work for Bellingcat.
Yeah, exactly. And so basically, when you look into his sort of story, he was a 65-year-old man. He'd run out of money. He didn't really want to work in the field that he was previously in, which was compliance. And then he basically had put out hundreds of CVs apparently. And he was he claimed online he was avidly seeking employment, but nothing was forthcoming. And then he started writing letters to people like Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, offering his advice on how to solve the immigration crisis and problems of the NHS. And then he applied to be a Conservative councillor, but then later switched to the Reform Party. And I did find his Facebook account, and on there, from what you can see publicly, because it is a private page, there were a couple of ranty posts about immigration. So there's a very weird story here beyond this. I think he was living out some strange fantasy. And look, number one, I would say don't start messing around with professional intelligence services offering your service. It's not a good idea. And if you are planning to be a triple agent, it might be worth informing the other intelligence services that you're planning to report back to that this is what you're doing.
Yeah, if you're you're now uncovering a whole more tragic dimension to this, and now I'm sort of starting to feel bad. Like, dude, you're 65. Is this really how you want to spend the final chapter of your life now? I mean, yeah, if you want to be a triple agent or whatever, and I mean, you got to MI5 or MI6 has to hire you first, and then you can maybe go do that stuff. You don't do the triple agent first and then go, hey guys, I got these really good. That it doesn't.
No.
Like, dude, just stop. Go home.
Yeah. It kind of reminded me a little bit of a very low-grade Robert Hansen type stalker, because he also was infatuated with James Bond and wanted to be something greater than he was.
Yeah.
And he had some socioeconomic issues that basically led to resentment, because he couldn't rise up the ranks of the FBI because he couldn't afford to kind of mix in the social circles of the upper echelons of the FBI. And he was an intelligent guy but lacked personal skills, so he kind of got shoved to more admin-y and analysis stuff when he wanted to be a field agent. So he kind of then reached out to the Russians and started trying to enact this weird fantasy. And it's
I'm just some advice for listeners, because I'm assuming if you're listening to this show, you are also interested in this stuff in this sort of world.
For all we know, Howard Phillips may have listened to this at one point.
As this man was. If you're interested, like, just listen to this, or go apply for your nation's intelligence service if you really want to, put your skin in the game. Don't do what this guy did, because this is not how you want to spend the final chapter of your life.
No, it's very sad.
It is. It is.
And
legitimately.
So now, he's probably going to spend. I mean, he won't spend a long time in prison because they've yet to sentence him. Britain seems to be. Our sentences do tend to be quite short for these kind of crimes. And
yeah, he committed a crime, and you can't do that stuff. But this is not.
It's very low level.
Yes, this is not a national security crisis that was averted or something, and the man does not need to spend the rest of his life in a hole. But still, don't do this.
Yeah, it's just bad. But there we go. It might be a fun talking point in the pub in 5 years' time for him, maybe. But now at least, he might now experience prison, so he might be able to write a book about, like, from alleged spy to prisoner or something. I don't know. Who knows? But I do feel sorry for him. I think it was out of all the spy, because I mean this kind of comes off the back of some actual other more worrying spy scandals that have been going on, because
very real Russian sabotage and espionage efforts all across the UK that are a national security concern.
Yeah. Just a few weeks back, 3 men from South London were found guilty of aggravated arson on behalf of the Wagner Group, and they were setting fire to warehouses and stuff. The warehouse was a warehouse that was storing Starlink equipment being sent to Ukraine, and the fire apparently caused £1 million worth of damage, and damage to residential blocks and stuff. Very dangerous stuff. And then so Wagner are trying to recruit sort of disaffected men at the moment. Probably women too. I mean, they have been recruited. Well, there was that scandal a few weeks back as well. We talked about where the was it the Bulgarian? Were they Bulgarian? I've lost track now. I think
yes, they were Bulgarian.
The Bulgarian spy ring. That's it, and stuff like that. So there are real kind of concerning things going on. But the story of Howard Phillips is definitely not quite as worrying, but more sad, to be sad. Really.
Yeah.
Anything else I'd like to add, or you?
No, don't be like Howard Phillips, dear listeners.
Yeah, please don't. So let's take a break and be right back with more. Welcome back, everybody. So our final story is about Trump's shift on the Ukraine weapons deal. So, Matt, this one you picked out, so I'll let you talk to us a little bit about this.
Yeah, so turning now to a major shift in how U.S. weapons are getting to Ukraine, a policy pivot born less of strategy than frustration and optics. So in mid-July, so a couple weeks ago now, the Trump administration unveiled a new mechanism. NATO allies will pull Patriot systems and other key weapons from their own stockpiles and send them to Ukraine, while the U.S. backfills those inventories with new weapons paid for by the Europeans. At least 8 countries are on board. Trump framed it as a win for U.S. arms makers. NATO's Mark Rutte called it a way to get Ukraine what it needs. And what it needs most is air defense. So June was the deadliest month for Ukrainians since the war began. Patriot batteries are overstretched, with some offline for maintenance. Under the new setup, Germany and Norway are buying new Patriots for Ukraine, and an unnamed country may offload up to 17 launchers, possibly referring to a stalled Swiss order. These are said to be available for near immediate shipment. This comes after the Trump administration temporarily paused Ukraine-bound arms, reportedly under pressure from Pentagon officials who prioritized Asia, like Elbridge Colby, who's the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. So what changed? According to reporting, Trump felt personally humiliated by Putin, who ignored his calls and kept firing missiles at Ukraine. The pivot seems driven more by optics than conviction, of course. So still, it's movement. The U.S. isn't sending weapons directly. This is routed through allies. The long-range systems Kyiv wants remain off the table, but the stopgap may help Ukraine, get what it needs for the next few months. And CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, estimates hundreds of millions in equipment could now move every few weeks. Their full breakdown with a bunch of really detailed charts and delivery timelines is linked in our show notes if folks want to dig deeper into that. So yes, Europe is paying more. U.S. factories may benefit, but the war grinds on, and there's still no clear end in sight. Chris, what do you think?
Well, yeah, like you were saying, this is definitely a positive development. Sadly, it's taken President Trump a very long time to understand that Russia is the aggressor here. And I think Trump may have overestimated the quality of his relationship with President Putin. We will see how that plays out. We've discussed this before. Well, actually, before I go into this, and as I believe, as of this recording, 3 Patriot missile batteries have actually been delivered via Germany.
Cool.
So that's a start, because Ukraine need missile defense and air defense as well as artillery. And as far as I'm aware as well, they have an artillery shortage and they have a barrel shortage as well, is what I've read, because obviously there's only so many times you can fire your artillery shells before the barrel starts to overheat and warp and start to fall apart. So it's a big issue there. We've discussed this before, but the MAGA movement has been very largely pro-Russia with regards to war in Ukraine, and many of the MAGA faithful online have parroted or shared Kremlin talking points, which Trump was also guilty of during the run-up to his election or re-election last year. I think his what I would class as his disgraceful attitude towards President Zelensky earlier this year, and the fallout that led to that freeze on vital weapons and sharing of intelligence, cost Ukraine dearly. And whilst up until now, Putin and Russia has largely been getting a free pass from the Trump administration, their so-called peace negotiations have really only led to allowing Russia more opportunities to bomb Ukraine and make it harder for Ukraine to defend itself. Dr. Phillips O'Brien, who is a Ukraine expert I follow, was very critical of Trump's recent 50 days for Putin to come to an agreement with Ukraine, because, as he puts it, it gives Russia a window of 50 more days or until September to continue its bombing campaign against Ukraine. The recent debate about who authorized the pause and the Pentagon sending more weapons to Ukraine shows that Trump is not fully on top of the people in his own administration. And apparently he claimed he was not the one who signed off on the pause. If you remember that from a few weeks ago. And did you pointed out to a particular person who might have been responsible for the pause? Is that right?
It was Elbridge Colby, who is William Colby's grandson, former CIA director. He did this on his own, supposedly, with the blessing of Pete Hegseth, and no one else in the administration kind of knew about it. And then it got quickly reversed.
Any repercussions?
No, he's still there.
Wow. Well, there we go. Maybe is he on Trump's naughty list at least, do you think?
He kind of did get his pee smacked, but he still has a job. He's still there, and there's our weapons coming through to Ukraine somehow. I know it's not ideal to a lot of European observers and stuff, but
Well, it's something, and so I think politically allowing these weapons to be supplied via NATO members gives Trump some political cover because, his party is divided over the war in Ukraine. So you got the MAGA Republicans who want the US to walk away and from helping Ukraine, and you got the more traditional Republicans pushing for him to step up US support. And as everything Trump does, it has to benefit him in some way. And at the moment, Putin's bruised his ego and now making him look weak. So he's flexing some muscle, possibly in the hope it will bring Putin away from his maximalist demands that will allow Trump to make this deal that he wants to make. Because Trump likes to be seen as a deal maker, and I'm sure he would love to be the man who makes the deal that ends the war in Ukraine. But my fear is if Putin doesn't back down, where will we be in a few weeks? Will Trump's poll numbers that are already not in a great place cause him to swing to the MAGA contingent of his party and abandon Ukraine to Putin, or will he side with more traditional Republicans and guarantee US support for Ukraine? This is still an ongoing thing because Trump, with his tariffs, there are times where he just wakes up in the morning and decides, it's going to be 30% today. And I've just been doing some corporate work, and I won't say who for, but for an organization that has really suffered quite badly and had to lay off people because of the unpredictability of these tariffs.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of working people out there right now who are being affected by Trump's policies. And what's interesting, just shifting this slightly to British politics for a moment, so Nigel Farage, who obviously is the leader of the Reform Party that seems to be at the moment doing quite well, he is desperate to move his image away from Trump because apparently being associated with Trump is actually messing up his support.
Within Reform.
Wow. And so that's very interesting.
Honestly.
Yeah. And this is the man who, posed with Trump with this shit-eating grin at the, gold elevator.
Yeah, he's been over here at so many different rallies and stuff. He was sort of, like the token Brit who they roll out and say, oh, yeah, the rest of the world is with you. No, they're not. But yeah, he was their guy.
Yeah. Farage is Trump's man. So there's Farage's weakness right there. And I do wonder if the people who, should we say the working people who do seem to be siding with Farage at the moment, and whose jobs are now being affected by these tariffs, whether or not they will connect the dots and realize that Farage is just the same thing as Trumpism. So we will see, but that's a whole different story for maybe next season. But anyway, all of this aside, so I think with this whole unpredictability of Trump and his support for Ukraine, I think this is incredibly stressful for the people of Ukraine, and I'm sure it's not easy for NATO members either. We're all kind of playing this delicate dance around President Trump and his fragile ego, and there's just this ridiculous sort of unpredictability to everything, and it's unnecessary. And so, yeah.
And it's so incremental. And just sort of, let's try this. No, okay, now we're going to do this now, and not. It's all over the place and scattershot. I mean, I think I'll make a prediction here. So I don't know how many days. Don't know offhand how many days it is since he sort of made that, we better have a peace deal in 50 days or you're going to be in trouble thing to Putin. But when that 50 days are up, I will make a prediction that we will not have a peace agreement.
Yeah.
And whenever we do have a peace agreement, God willing, it won't be because of that sort of like tariff threat. So Trump's threat there was that at the end of those 50 days, if there isn't a deal, he would was like 100% tariff or something on any countries that are still sort of trading with Russia, because we don't really trade much of anything with Russia anymore after since the invasion started. That would, really target like China and India, which a whole bunch of complications there about getting them to comply with their trade with Russia, and then how do we enforce that and how that affects us? That's a whole mess. What you really want to see is sanctions from the U.S., not tariffs and that all these kind of games around timelines and everything. No, just sanction the shit out of them.
Because they are working to some extent.
Yes, in some ways, no, but in some ways, yes. It's sort of, we can do more there in that field. But overall, I mean, it is a tiptoe in the right direction. Arms systems are getting through. He's getting progressively more pissed off with Putin, which is which is good. Keir Giles, what he said, it takes a while for people to sort of come around to the reality of what Putin so obviously is.
Yeah.
That may be proving true with Trump eventually. We'll see.
Yeah, we will see indeed. But as always, I just feel for the people of Ukraine. Really wish this war would end. And yeah, I just hope it ends on a side that's good for Ukraine. But there we go. So no, that's everything from me. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Or
Nope. All good for me.
Cool. I think we could have covered everything there. So just a couple of stories of note that we'll link to in the show notes. There's an interesting article in the BBC called Sparring in Space, and the BBC have gained rare access to a US base tracking global missile strike. So it's worth checking that one out. And there's an interesting one from Ars Technica called It's Hunting Season in Orbit as Russian Killer Satellites Mystify Skywatchers. So that's another interesting one to check out as well. So check out the stories and notes section at the bottom of the show notes, and you'll see some there from extra articles that Matt and I think are worth looking at, but we just haven't found the way to bring them into the show this week just because of timing, etc. There's so many things we can cover. God, you saw our shared note about the things that we don't end up covering. It's kind of shocking, really. Probably could have written a few books by now, but there we go. Well, Matt, thank you for joining me today. Up to anything exciting over the weekend? Anything nice?
No, not really. Just kind of hanging around. What about you?
Yeah. Me, I just a family gathering, and taking my father-in-law for a hearing test. So, talk about hearing. So, quick word of advice to other podcasts out there. So, I'm using these over-ear Sony headphones, and I've been using them a lot because they're quite good for stopping audio bleed coming out when we do interviews and stuff, and I also use them for editing. But what I have discovered, they have a bizarre side effect. So sometimes when I've been using them a lot over the day, I get a weird rumbling in my ear, and I thought I was getting maybe tinnitus or something. And so I went to the doctor, got tested, and I had a hearing test, and medically I have perfect hearing, which is great. So anytime I can't hear someone now, I can say, well, it's not me, it's you. I've got medical science on my side now. But these headphones are causing pressure on my ears, which then leads this weird rumbling if you wear them for a long period of time. So fellow podcasters who might be listening, if you have a weird rumbling in your ear after wearing headphones, it might be the over-ear headphones. So I'm reducing my use of them. I now edit with in-ear headphones, but still use these for interviews because they're still very good at stopping audio bleed. But just in case anybody out there is listening and been getting weird rumbling in their ears, might be worth double checking what headphones you're using. So there we are.
Hey, there you go.
So there we go. Medical advice and everything today. So doing quite well. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the links that we put in the show notes. We're on we're on all the podcast platforms, and we're on YouTube as well. So if you want to watch us, hello, we're on YouTube, and you can see us chatting to each other. And you can follow us on social media. We're on Bluesky, Instagram, and Threads, and it's all just Secrets and Spies. I'm most active personally on the Bluesky and Instagram, so you'll find us mainly on there. So this is our last espresso martini of season 9. So we take August off from a production side of things. There will still be episodes airing in August. There's a whole collection of interviews that we've been building up to share over August. So there's some very interesting episodes coming up. But this is it for Espresso Martini until September. So we will be back in September. I think we're planning to still stick to the pattern of one every 2 weeks, just because we discovered that it's a bit more manageable. And just, if you enjoyed this episode, please share away, because we are, the more people we can get to listen, the more time we can devote to the show, which is kind of the thing there, really. But no, I'm really pleased. It's been a hell of a season 9, and it's almost over now. And then, we come to season 10. So the podcast's officially 9 years old, and we're moving to our 10th season. So by this time next year, this podcast has been going for 10 years. So provided we're all still here, this time next year will be coming up to our 10th anniversary, which is crazy. Absolutely crazy. There's another podcast called Spy Hards, who are friends of the podcast, and they're hitting their 5th anniversary soon. So, it's amazing how time flies when you're podcasting.
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah. And, we'll reiterate as well, it's been really great having you join me on the podcast. It's been nice to have a partner in crime because...
fun couple of years,
Yeah, it's been great. So, we've got lots of ideas for future episodes and stuff. And I've still yet to edit the video of us in DC together. I need to do that. I'm sitting on all these photographs and video that we took together last year when we met up, and I still yet to edit that. And so probably for the year's anniversary of that trip, maybe I'll release it then. It was
That'd be a good thing to drop with season 10, the sort of stuff we shot there for that, or at least half of what we shot over there for that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was cool, and hopefully, maybe you come to London for a live event at some point in the future as well, because that's something we've been chatting about. So, and we must also do a listener survey. So I'll sort that out over August. But if anybody in London in particular, and then maybe in the US as well, but if you are, one thing I'm wanting to do is do some live events. It's been something I've been wanting to do for ages. And I am sort of looking for venues and stuff. So anybody in London, if you're listening and if you hear that we want to do a live event and you would be interested in attending, can you just drop us an email, secretsandspiespodcast@gmail.com? Because it'd just be interesting to kind of get an idea of gauging the interest. And also, if you have any tips for venues that don't cost the earth, but have a bar. I think that's the one requirement. I think the venue needs to have a bar, and
a bar would be nice,
and not cost the earth, and be somewhere not obscure. Because I think somewhere central-ish would be amazing, or I don't know, on the periphery of certain places. But if they're like somewhere like in Stoke Newington, for example, Stoke Newington, I love the place, but my goodness, to hold an event in Stoke Newington, it feels like a mission for almost everybody unless you live in Stoke Newington. So places like that we'll want to avoid. So, but I do love Stoke Newington. It's a great place and there's some great cafes there. So no disrespect to anybody in Stoke Newington, but there we go. So that is it for us on Espresso Martini this season. We will be back with this in September, keeping an eye out for all the spy, geopolitics, and technology and so on stories that inform the world of intelligence. So there we go. So thank you so much for your support. It's been a wonderful season this year. I think we've done some, really interesting interviews, and I think we've had some great conversations, you and I. And we were on Dog Shirt TV just the other day as well, talking about the podcast. That was fun. With Ben and Alicia. It was really good fun. So if you haven't seen that, do check out the link I posted the other day to that. So there we go. So thank you so much, everybody, for your support. Thank you for listening. You take care. Have a wonderful summer. Don't get sunburnt, even though you're probably unlikely to in London at the moment. But have a good time.
Yep. Take care.
Take care. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening. This is Secrets and Spies.